Okay, I have sort of a somber topic for you today, and it's the topic of death. Death is not an easy thing to talk about, even in your native language, and it's doubly hard or extra hard when you're speaking about death in a foreign language. So, I want to give you some ways that you can talk about death today and still be polite and still be respectable when you talk about death, because there are some very impolite ways to talk about death in English, and you have to avoid these. So, we don't often actually mention death in English. We use a lot of euphemisms, and that means things that you can say instead of actually saying death, because we don't like to actually say that word. So, here are a couple of euphemisms for death that will allow you to talk about it in a softer way. So there's some polite euphemisms that you can use to talk about death. Things like pass away. You can say something like, I'm sorry your mother passed away last week. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. This is a good way to kind of give condolences or to comfort the person who's had somebody die or the grieving person. If you're talking about the person who actually died, usually you use something like deceased rather than the dead person. We don't say the dead person in English. It's considered impolite to say the dead person. So things like your dead grandma left you some money. We don't say that. You say like your deceased grandma left you some money as inheritance, money that you leave for the next generation. It's okay to say die. Everybody is kind of scared of death, and so it's okay, but we often use these euphemisms to soften the blow or to make it a little bit easier to kind of process death. And so when you're speaking in English and comforting, or you have to kind of talk about death, you can use those things that I just taught you to have a softer approach to your comfort of the grieving person. Pets are kind of a special case. We often take a different approach to pets when they pass away. We are kind of uncomfortable with letting pets suffer, and so we will often euthanize a pet when they become older. We will do things like put them to sleep. It's a phrasal verb that means to euthanize a pet, to chemically induce death at the end of their life so that they're not suffering anymore. So you could comfort somebody and say, I'm sorry your beloved pet died. Did you have to put them to sleep at the end? That's a way to talk about euthanasia in a polite way. Put down is another way, and it kind of means the same thing as put to sleep. So did you have to put your pet down? Put out of its misery is kind of the same, although we don't tend to use this for pets. It's a little bit more visceral, or it's a little bit more brutal in its approach. So this would be something like a horse breaks its leg and you put it out of its misery. This is typically reserved for livestock and farm animals. We don't really use this for beloved pets like cats or dogs. So put out of its misery is restricted for farm animals. Or, for example, maybe you hit a deer on the highway and you have to put it out of its misery. You know it's going to die and you have to put it down. Careful with these, though. We don't use these for humans, so you don't want to say put down, put out of its misery, or put to sleep with a human. It's not comfortable to talk about these ways, although we can have medically assisted suicide, or we can have euthanasia. These are proper ways to say that somebody has ended their life if they have a terminal or an uncurable illness. A couple of things you probably don't want to use, but are also relevant, are the idea of culling or slaughtering. These are used for groups of animals that are wild animals or farm animals. Cull means to kill animals because their population is getting out of hand. So there's far too many deer for the ecosystem to support, and so you start to cull the deer. You start to selectively kill some deer so that they don't cause a problem with the ecosystem. Slaughter, on the other hand, is typically reserved for meat animals. So cows will go to slaughter and become meat at the end of their lives. Whether or not you agree with the practice of meat eating, that is the process of killing an animal for meat. So you could say cows are going to slaughter. You wouldn't say the cows are going to be put down. This is a lot more humane. It's for pets. So using these euphemisms and these different words for death in the proper places is kind of important when you're talking about death. And so spend some time memorizing these and spend some time making sentences with these, because you have to be comfortable with these to speak about death politely in English. Probably one of the things that makes me most uncomfortable in English is giving condolences to people who've had a loved one die. I'm not particularly good at it. It's doubly hard in a foreign language, but there are some things that you can do to kind of facilitate a good communication between you and somebody whose loved one has died. So you can use things like very formal or polite condolences, things like, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that your grandmother passed away. Please accept my condolences, or please accept my sympathies during this difficult time. And often just if there's anything I can do for you, please just let me know, is a good thing to add to condolences. These are very formal condolences, but they can be used in kind of informal situations. But typically you would use this for people that you don't know particularly well, your boss or colleagues at work, for example. If you know the person a little bit better, you can kind of go into some more casual condolences. So you can say, like, I'm sorry to hear about the person's names. And so you can say something like, I'm sorry to hear about Bob. I know he was really close to you. Is there anything I can do for you? You can try to kind of empathize with the person who's lost a loved one. So you can say things like, I know it must be very hard for you at the moment with the loss of your grandmother. Is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything I can do to facilitate the situation? And then just be open to actually doing something to help that person. This is a good way to give condolences to somebody that you're a little bit closer with. It's a little bit less formal, but it's also a little bit nicer. It's a little bit more comforting from a person who is a little bit closer. That's the more serious side of this, but death in English is also kind of made light of sometimes, or it's made fun of sometimes. And we've got a lot of great euphemisms that are kind of enjoyable to use. You definitely don't want to be using these in real world situations, especially if you're comforting somebody that has lost somebody. But there's a lot of euphemisms and idioms in English that are a little bit more fun or a little bit more approachable to talk about death. Kick the bucket, for example, is a great one. It means that somebody has died. So, like, one day we are all going to kick the bucket. So you just have to kind of make life as good as you possibly can. So that's a way to say everybody's going to die one day. One day everybody's going to kick the bucket. Bite the dust is another one. So one day I'm going to bite the dust, or he's bitten the dust, is a good kind of fun or approachable way to talk about death. Another one is meet one's maker. Maker being God in whatever religion that person believes in. So if you were to meet your maker, you are going to meet your God. You have died. Just remember that with these ones, you do not want to use these when somebody has actually died. They are kind of for external situations where you're kind of making light of death or you're making fun of death. You're challenging it in a way. You definitely don't want to use these when somebody has actually died. So death doesn't need to be so unapproachable in English. There are some good ways that you can talk about death, and studying the vocabulary will kind of let you talk about it in a more accessible and more fluid way. It's important to kind of come across as being professional, and those euphemisms and idioms allow you to do that without being too direct. So softening your approach around death is really important when you're giving condolences. Thank you very much. I'm Ryan. This is English Learning Adventures, and if you like what I do, give me a like and follow. I really appreciate it.